What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected voices clashes with late-night television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Morgan Freeman sits down for what was supposed to be a routine interview on Jimmy Kimmel Live, only to find himself in the middle of a verbal battlefield that would leave audiences stunned and social media ablaze. This isn't just another celebrity spat. This is the moment when decades of professionalism collided with reckless provocation, creating television history for all the wrong reasons. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two titans of entertainment go head-to-head in what became the most explosive late-night confrontation ever captured on camera. The Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as Morgan Freeman's black sedan pulled up to the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio entrance. The legendary actor, dressed in his signature navy blazer and carrying the quiet dignity that had made him one of cinema's most beloved figures, stepped out into the California evening. At 86 years old, Freeman had weathered countless interviews, navigating decades of Hollywood politics with the same measured grace that defined his most iconic performances. Tonight, however, would test that composure in ways he never anticipated. Inside the studio, Jimmy Kimmel paced behind his desk, his usual pre-show jitters amplified by something darker. The host had been under increasing pressure from network executives about declining ratings, and whispers about his confrontational interview style had grown louder in recent months. Several A-list celebrities had quietly blacklisted his show after uncomfortable encounters, and tonight's booking with Freeman represented a crucial opportunity to prove he could still deliver must-see television. But Kimmel's definition of must-see had evolved into something more dangerous, a willingness to push boundaries that other hosts wouldn't dare cross. 5 minutes to showtime, called out the stage manager as Freeman settled into the guest chair during the final sound check. The veteran actor adjusted his microphone with practiced ease, exchanging polite conversation with the production crew who had worked with him on multiple appearances over the years. Freeman had always been a consummate professional, arriving prepared and treating everyone from the host to the camera operators with equal respect. His reputation in Hollywood was sterling, a man who let his work speak for itself and rarely engaged in public controversies. Kimmel slid into his host chair, flashing his trademark grin, but there was an edge to his demeanor that the seasoned crew members recognized. The host had been particularly volatile during rehearsals, making cutting remarks about guests who he felt weren't giving him enough material to work with. His writers had prepared what they called spicy questions for Freeman, topics that skirted the line of good taste and professional courtesy. The show's producers had raised concerns during the afternoon meeting, but Kimmel had dismissed their warnings with a wave of his hand, insisting that real television required real risks. As the studio lights blazed to life and the familiar theme music began to play, Freeman straightened in his chair, his weathered hands folded calmly in his lap. He had granted this interview to promote his latest documentary project about environmental conservation, a passion project that had consumed the last 2 years of his life. The actor expected the usual format: light banter about his career, perhaps a funny anecdote or two, and a respectful discussion about his new work. He had no way of knowing that Kimmel had prepared an entirely different agenda. The audience applauded enthusiastically as the cameras rolled, their energy filling the studio with the electric atmosphere that made live television so unpredictable. Kimmel launched into his opening monologue with his characteristic rapid-fire delivery, but his jokes seemed more pointed than usual, containing subtle jabs at Hollywood elites and aging actors who refused to step aside for younger talent. Freeman watched from the wings, his expression neutral but his experienced eye catching the hostile undertones that seasoned performers learned to recognize. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the incomparable Morgan Freeman," Kimmel announced, his smile wide but somehow not reaching his eyes. The audience erupted as Freeman walked onto the stage with his characteristic measured gait, waving graciously to the crowd that had risen to their feet in genuine appreciation. The contrast between the warm reception from the audience and the cool calculation in Kimmel's greeting was stark to anyone paying attention. Freeman settled into the guest chair, his presence immediately commanding the space in the way that only true legends could manage. "Morgan, thank you for being here," Kimmel began, his tone deceptively casual. "You know, I have to ask, at your age, do you ever think about slowing down? I mean, when do legends like you know it's time to call it quits?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Freeman's eyebrows raised slightly, the first sign that something wasn't quite right about this interview. "Well, Jimmy," he replied in his distinctive voice, "I've never been one to think about quitting when there's still work to be done. Age is just a number, and passion doesn't have an expiration date." Kimmel leaned back in his chair, a predatory smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "But surely you must feel the pressure from younger actors who are hungry for the roles. You've been playing for decades. Don't you think it's a bit selfish to hold on to parts that could launch someone else's career?" The studio fell unusually quiet. Even the production crew, accustomed to Kimmel's provocative style, sensed that something had shifted. Freeman's expression remained composed, but there was a new tension in his posture, the subtle stiffening of someone who had just realized they were under attack. "I've never taken a role from anyone," Freeman replied carefully. "I earn every part I play, just as I always have." Of course," Kimmel continued, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "But let's talk about some of the controversies that have followed you over the years. There have been whispers, haven't there? About your behavior on set. About comments you've made to female co-stars?" The question hit the studio like a physical blow. Freeman's composure cracked for just a moment, his eyes flashing with something dangerous. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that they were witnessing something that wasn't meant for public consumption. But this was exactly what Kimmel had been building toward. The moment when his guest's legendary calm would finally shatter, creating the kind of viral moment that would dominate social media for weeks. "I think," Freeman said slowly, his voice carrying a warning that anyone who knew him would have recognized, "we should stick to discussing my work." But Kimmel had already tasted blood in the water, and there would be no backing down now. The host's eyes lit up with the kind of malicious glee that had become his trademark in recent months. He leaned forward, invading Freeman's personal space in a way that would have made any reasonable interviewer uncomfortable. "Oh, come on, Morgan. You've been in this business for over 50 years. Surely you can handle a few tough questions. Or are you one of those actors who only wants to talk about the good stuff?" Freeman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "I'm here to discuss my documentary about climate change, Jimmy. It's important work that deserves attention." "Climate change, right?" Kimmel said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Let me ask you this. Don't you think it's a bit hypocritical for someone who spent decades flying around the world in private jets to suddenly become an environmental crusader? I mean, what's your carbon footprint compared to, say, a regular working person?" The attack was calculated and cruel, designed to undermine not just Freeman's current project, but his entire late career pivot toward activism. The audience began to murmur, sensing that they were witnessing something ugly unfold. Freeman's publicist, watching from the wings, took a step forward, her face pale with alarm. "My commitment to environmental causes is genuine," Freeman replied, his voice carrying a new edge. "I've put my money where my mouth is, funding research and conservation efforts around the world." Sure, Kimmel continued, his smile becoming more predatory by the moment. "But isn't this whole environmental thing just a way to rehabilitate your image after all those harassment allegations? I mean, let's be honest here, you're not exactly the squeaky clean hero that Hollywood pretends you are you?" The studio went dead silent. Even the camera operators stopped their subtle movements, frozen by the audacity of what their host had just said on live television. Freeman's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in the interview, His legendary composure began to crack visibly. "Those allegations were thoroughly investigated and found to be without merit," Freeman said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And I won't sit here and let you drag my reputation through the mud for ratings." But Kimmel was beyond reason now, intoxicated by the power he held in this moment. "Oh, but that's where you're wrong, Morgan. You see, you came on my show, which means you're in my house, playing by my rules. And my rules say that nothing is off limits." The host turned to face the audience, his arms spread wide in a gesture of mock innocence. "I mean, folks, isn't this what you want? Real talk? No more softball questions and fake Hollywood niceness? Don't you deserve to know what these people are really like?" A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the crowd, but most of the audience sat in stunned silence. They had come expecting entertainment, not character assassination. Freeman remained perfectly still in his chair, but anyone who knew him could see the storm building behind his eyes. "You know what I think?" Kimmel continued, spinning back to face his guest. "I think you old-school actors are terrified because your time is up. The world has moved on, and you can't handle that there's no place for your kind of Hollywood royalty anymore." Freeman's hands gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles showing white against his dark skin. "My kind?" he repeated, his voice barely audible but carrying a weight that made everyone in the studio lean forward. "Yeah, your kind," Kimmel pressed on, completely oblivious to the dangerous ground he was treading. "The untouchable legends who think they're above criticism, who think their past achievements give them a free pass to say and do whatever they want. Tell me, Morgan, what's it like to watch your legacy crumble in real time?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and something fundamental shifted in Freeman's demeanor. The measured diplomatic mask he had worn for decades began to slip away, revealing the steel beneath. His voice, when he spoke, carried all the authority of his most commanding film roles, but this time it was directed at a very real target. "You want to know what's crumbling?" Freeman asked, rising slowly from his chair. "Your credibility, your professionalism, and apparently your basic human decency. I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, son, and I've never seen a host treat a guest with such blatant disrespect." Kimmel's smile faltered for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features as he realized that his carefully orchestrated ambush was spiraling beyond his control. Hey, sit down, Morgan. We're just having a conversation here." "No," Freeman said, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "This isn't a conversation. This is you trying to make a name for yourself by tearing down people who've earned their respect through decades of hard work. You want ratings? You want viral moments? Well, congratulations. You're about to get exactly what you asked for." The production crew exchanged panicked glances as their guest towered over their host, transforming from mild-mannered interview subject into something far more formidable. Freeman's presence filled the entire studio, making Kimmel look small and petty by comparison. "I came here tonight as a professional courtesy," Freeman continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I came to talk about work that matters, about trying to save the planet for your children and mine. But instead, you've chosen to turn this into some kind of tabloid hit piece." Kimmel tried to regain control, his voice taking on a pleading quality that revealed just how badly he had miscalculated. "Come on, Morgan, you're being way too sensitive. This is just good television." "Good television?" Freeman's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Son, I've been making good television since before you were born. And let me tell you something. Good television doesn't require destroying someone's dignity for entertainment." The audience was completely captivated now, watching as one of cinema's most respected figures dismantled their host with surgical precision. Freeman's years of experience, his natural charisma, and his genuine outrage combined to create a moment of television that was indeed unforgettable. Just not in the way Kimmel had intended. "You think you're some kind of crusading journalist," Freeman continued, "asking the hard questions that need to be asked. But you're not. You're just a bully with a microphone, picking on people you think won't fight back. The words hit Kimmel like physical blows, each one stripping away another layer of his carefully constructed persona. The host's face had gone, pale beads of sweat visible on his forehead as he realized that his grand plan had backfired spectacularly. But Freeman wasn't finished yet. "You want to know what real courage looks like?" Freeman continued, his voice carrying the weight of decades in the entertainment industry. "It's not ambushing guests with gotcha questions. It's not trying to destroy careers for shock value. Real courage is using your platform to lift people up, to shine light on important issues, to make the world a little bit better than you found it." The studio audience sat transfixed, many of them pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a historic moment in television history. Freeman's transformation from polite guest to avenging force of nature was complete, and every word he spoke resonated with an authority that Kimmel could never hope to match. "I've worked with presidents and paupers, with legends and newcomers," Freeman said, his gaze never leaving Kimmel's increasingly uncomfortable face. "And you know what the truly great ones have in common? They don't need to tear others down, to build themselves up. They don't confuse cruelty with cleverness." Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation, his voice cracking slightly as he spoke. "Look, Morgan, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start over? We can talk about your documentary, your environmental work." Freeman's laugh was cold and cutting. "Start over? Son, you don't get to ring that bell twice. You've shown everyone here exactly who you are tonight, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to make you comfortable." The production crew was in full panic mode now, with producers frantically whispering into their headsets and camera operators unsure whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial. But Freeman commanded the space so completely that stopping seemed impossible. This was his moment, and everyone in the studio knew it. "Let me tell you something about respect," Freeman continued, straightening to his full height. "It's not something you demand. It's something you earn. And you've just spent the last 10 minutes proving that you understand neither concept." Kimmel's trademark smugness had completely evaporated, replaced by the look of a man who had seriously miscalculated his opponent. He tried to interrupt, but Freeman's voice cut through his stammering like a knife through paper. "I've been in this business for over 50 years, and I've seen hosts come and go. The good ones understand that their job is to make their guests shine, to create moments of genuine connection with the audience. But you're so desperate for attention that you're willing to destroy that sacred trust between host and guest." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Freeman's presence filled the entire studio, making him seem larger than life, while Kimmel appeared to shrink in his chair with each passing moment. "You think controversy equals relevance," Freeman said, his voice dropping to that distinctive whisper that had made him famous. "You think shocking people is the same as entertaining them. But all you've accomplished tonight is showing everyone that you're a small man trying to feel big by attacking people who can't fight back." "I can fight back," Kimmel protested weakly, but his words carried no conviction. Freeman smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Can you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're about to cry." The observation was devastating in its accuracy. Kimmel's eyes were indeed glistening, his composure completely shattered by the methodical dismantling of his reputation. The host who had built his career on embarrassing others was now experiencing that humiliation firsthand, and he clearly had no idea how to handle it. "Here's what's going to happen," Freeman said, his voice carrying the authority of a judge delivering a verdict. "I'm going to walk off this stage with my dignity intact. You're going to sit there and think about what you've done. And tomorrow, people are going to remember this as the night Jimmy Kimmel proved he's not worthy of the platform he's been given." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Freeman began to remove his microphone, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Every gesture communicated that he was in complete control of the situation, while Kimmel remained frozen behind. His desk, "Morgan, wait," Kimmel called out, his voice desperate now. "We can edit this. We can start fresh. We can—" Freeman paused in his removal of the microphone, fixing Kimmel with a stare that could have melted steel. "Edit this? You think this is about protecting your show? Son, this isn't about your ratings or your reputation anymore. This is about showing people that there are still some lines you don't cross, some people you don't mess with." The microphone came free with a soft pop, and Freeman placed it carefully on the arm of his chair. The gesture was final, definitive, a clear signal that the interview was over on his terms, not Kimmel's. "Ladies and gentlemen," Freeman said, turning to address the audience directly, "thank you for witnessing something important tonight. You've seen what happens when professionalism meets playground behavior. I hope you'll remember the difference." The audience began to applaud, tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a masterclass in dignity under fire, delivered by one of the greatest actors of all time. Freeman acknowledged their response with a gracious nod, every inch the gentleman even in his moment of righteous anger. "I came here to talk about saving our planet," Freeman said, his voice carrying to every corner of the studio. "Instead, I've had to try to save this young man's soul. I'm not sure which task is more difficult." With that devastating final line, Freeman turned and began walking toward the stage exit. His stride was measured and confident, each step a testament to his unshakable dignity. Behind him, Kimmel sat in stunned silence, looking like a child who had just been scolded by his grandfather. The studio erupted in chaos as Freeman disappeared behind the curtain. Audience members were on their feet, some cheering, others simply staring in disbelief at what they had witnessed. Cameras continued to roll, capturing Kimmel's shell-shocked expression as he struggled to process what had just happened to his carefully orchestrated show. Security personnel moved quickly to escort Freeman to his waiting car. But their presence was unnecessary. The legendary actor moved through the backstage area with the same calm authority he had displayed on stage. Staff members stepped aside respectfully, many offering quiet words of support as he passed. Outside the studio, Freeman's car waited with the engine running. He slid into the back seat with the same grace he had shown throughout the evening, adjusting his jacket and looking out at the Los Angeles night as if nothing unusual had occurred. His phone was already buzzing with calls from agents, friends, and journalists, but he ignored them all. There would be time for explanations later. Back inside the studio, Kimmel finally found his voice, stammering through an awkward transition to commercial break. But the damage was done, and everyone in the building knew it. The host who had built his career on making others uncomfortable had just been given a masterclass in how it felt to be on the receiving end. As Freeman's car pulled away from the studio, the actor allowed himself a small smile. He had come to promote important work about environmental conservation, and while that hadn't happened as planned, he had accomplished something perhaps more valuable. He had reminded everyone watching that dignity, respect, and genuine class never go out of style. The confrontation was over, but its impact would be felt for years to come.